William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I welcome you to another Two Hats special of community events. Let's look in and see what's really happening.
And good afternoon and welcome to Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with the late Patti Fink, who's on time, and the early Lerone Landis, who isn't.
Yeah, he's not.
No. But he'll be back next week, I'm assuming. He probably told us last week, and we just don't listen.
That's probably true, because neither one of us can remember if he said, hey, I'm not going to be here next week.
Yeah. So, Lerone will be back next week, unless he's not. And because it is Easter next week.
Yes.
And Passover.
And Passover.
So what are you doing for Passover?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I'm celebrating my birthday, though, tomorrow.
Yes, you are. Happy birthday. And you're turning 70.
Not 70. No.
David.
Well, you
36.
know, I thought you were like me and didn't do them in order.
Oh, that could be.
Yeah.
Well, happy 70th birthday.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And our guest is Jade, Lenore LaDuff. Jade is with Black Transwomen, which is it's actually a national organization that was founded here, because when there's not one of those, we found it here.
We do.
We're great at doing groups. And also works with Resource Center. She facilitates. You facilitate the. My mouth is not working today. We found that in the green room before the show. She facilitates the Gender Brave group under the Empowerment Program at Resource Center. And later on in the show, maybe my words will make more sense to me.
Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
We don't care if they make sense to you. We just want them to make sense to us.
Well, but if they don't make sense to me, then I'm probably just gibberish, saying gibberish. Let's start and talk about the conference that you have coming up. Black Trans Men and Black Trans Women are two sister-brother groups, right?
Correct.
That were founded here 7-8 years ago, something like that. Is it long?
Approximately.
Yeah, something
give or
like
take.
that.
So I'm really bad with dates. David, FYI. So if I get it wrong, please don't charge it to my head.
Well, we'll get the date of the conference right.
Oh, yeah, of course.
When is the conference?
The conference is going to be April 24th through April 29th this year. And it's going to be held at the Wyndham. And it's going to be amazing because...
Which Wyndham?
The Wyndham Park.
The one up by LBJ, right? Okay.
So it's going to be held at the Wyndham Park, and this conference, like none other, is essentially produced and for Black and Brown people of color of the transgender, non-conforming, non-binary community, which is not something that you see oftentimes in the space we live in general. So yes.
Well, I remember doing one of the first articles about the group, and it was one of those things that the group was started because we figured there already was one, but there wasn't, so we'll start a local group, and then we'll just affiliate with whoever it is nationally, and there wasn't one of those, so it became, okay, we'll be the national group.
Right.
And you've had a lot of success with that. You have a number of chapters.
Yes. So we have chapters all over the country. We have regional chapters in New York City. We have chapters in Baltimore, Maryland, Atlanta, Georgia, Texas, of course. We have a regional chapter in Washington. We have a regional chapter in Kansas City.
And, you know, it's funny how that happens a lot in the LGBT community, where we started here and we show New York how to do it. It's the thing that we're good at doing is founding groups, and have been for the last 30 or 40 years. It's interesting that we do.
And not just groups. We got our ordinance, and our non-discrimination ordinance in the city of Dallas was May 8th, 2002, which included protections based upon sexual orientation and gender identity ahead of New York City. So that was kind of groundbreaking as well.
Now, I will say, and I'm not, jibing at anyone, but New York City does definitely have some things in place that put them ahead of the game when it comes to insurance coverage and things of that nature. Now, but I was expecting Texas to lead the charge in that, and I'm still waiting on that. I mean, I'm not going to wait too long because the gray hairs are already starting to come in. And when I get to my 70th birthday, Patti, I want to make sure that I have everything that I need, and that at least my tax dollars should be going towards something other than the streets that have so many holes and dents and dings in them.
Yeah.
And I wish you great luck with that, because we're working really hard to get all of those things in place, so that when we're, like when I turn 71, maybe I could.
You're going to do them in order now.
Well, I jump around, maybe next year I'll be 34.
And that works for me.
That we have all those things in place.
One of the things that you do every year here in Dallas, Black Trans Men, Black Trans Women has a national conference, and several hundred people come in for this conference. Why a separate conference? And we were talking about this before the show, because I know of all the conferences that I get invited to during the year, that's the one that I set time aside for every year because I enjoy it. Now, obviously, I blend.
So well.
You blend everywhere, David. You have such a blendable palette.
Doesn't he just blend everywhere?
He's such a chameleon.
But I do. We were talking about one of the workshops that I went to last year, and it was mostly Black trans women who were in this group, and me. And why did I go to that one? Because I knew a couple of the people who were going to be attending that workshop. And we were just all laughing, and they were just saying things that made me blush because, these were women's issues, trans women's issues. But I was just laughing right along with them, and we had such a good time. I always enjoy this conference. But what are some of the issues that would make you want to have a separate conference? Not that anybody's not invited. Anybody is invited to attend this conference, and especially other trans people in this area go to it because it's a great conference.
So a number of different things. When you think about culturally, the things that are different in the African American community or persons of color, there are just different things that people of color experience that are different from other individuals. And not to say, in this particular situation or this particular example, we're talking about creating a conference that is produced by and essentially geared towards people of color. Like you mentioned, everyone is welcome to the conference. But I asked myself, what conference was there before this one that welcomed me? And the answer, I don't know the answer to that question. So there was definitely a need because there wasn't anything that was so openly inclusive and radically inclusive to include individuals of trans experience, gender nonconforming, black, brown, any person of color. There wasn't an inclusive conference that I'm aware of that existed for those individuals. So creating this space was not only needed, it was necessary because at the end of the day, as you've seen, they exist, we exist. So creating space and time and opportunity for individuals to come together is so important. And thankfully, though so many years ago, Carter saw that as a need, had the foresight to create this organization and to create such an amazing conference that will bring people together. So I wouldn't say that it was a...
So what are some of the cultural things that you would discuss, that you're trying to get your arms around, that are even different for you as a trans person?
So some things, just culturally, when you talk about persons of color, you mention the church, or and there's so many individuals that may have been raised in the church, and as anyone, I can't say everyone, but many people in the LGBTQI plus community, especially the trans community, may have experienced what's called like church hurt. And church hurt is synonymous to things that speak disparagingly to who you are as a person. And trans folk and gender nonconforming folk, non-binary people, have experienced these same things. And so they're coming from this deeply rooted church life to try and navigate through life. And then you get to this point in your life where you're just not sure what to do, what's different. You really assimilate still with what you were taught and everything that your family has instilled in you, all these different things. And it's like trying to bridge the gap between what you believe and what you really feel and what they're telling you or expressing to you. So, and I can't say that that's not the same for other communities. I just know that that's one that's really prevalent for people of color, because the church is usually a huge stakeholder in community.
Sure.
You know, I think it's really interesting. There's been a documentary around now for 4 or 5 years called the L Word, Mississippi, and it just aired again the other night on cable, and it strikes me, it hurts my heart. But it strikes me that it's in the Deep South. Of course, it's in Mississippi, and it's predominantly black lesbians although there are trans women as well in this documentary. And they talk about how they know they're going to hell, but they're going to be who they are. That's the church entrenched. That's the church really entrenched in people's lives. When you no longer reject the church and what they're saying, but you buy into it completely and say, I am going to hell. It just hurt my heart that that's what they were experiencing, because the culture is so smothering, you know, and I'm grateful that there are people who can cut away from that and think about it and realize God made me too, and I'm not going to go to hell. So it just made me sad. It just made me sad that the church has that much pull in people's lives that they're going to go ahead and be who they are, but they feel like they really are going to go to hell.
Yeah, and that's a common feeling that resonates with a lot of people. And I've experienced individuals firsthand, even behind the pulpit, saying, you know, someone that identifies with the LGBTQI plus community, and they themselves are preaching across a pulpit to a congregation of people saying, you know, this is a sin, and, you know, this, and this, but what you can do is this, and this. And I was like, is this real life? Hold on. It can't be real life. And so I think that just goes to show you the amount of stock that is rooted in religion. So with that being said, the conference is more of a spiritual experience and not necessarily one that is deeply rooted in religion.
Well, again, before the show, we were talking a little bit, and I said, you know, most of the black lesbians and the black gay men that I know are very religious. And some have found, you know, Cathedral of Hope. Some have found a friendly church that's predominantly African American, and they've found different places. And some haven't. Some continue to go where they grew up. You said that's not what you find in the black trans community, that they're continuing to be religious predominantly.
Right. So, and this is just my own. You know, I don't know every single, you know, we all don't know each other. We all don't know. Let's say that we all don't know each other. I don't know every trans person, and every trans person doesn't know me. So with that being said, the persons that I've had an opportunity to know and engage with, a lot of them assimilate with different religions that they grew up with for a number of different reasons. One being that they've educated themselves to a degree that yielded them to learn something else, to feel something else, to navigate towards something else. But interestingly enough, it is still under an umbrella that speaks to the same concept of the religion that they may have originally assimilated with, being, you know, love and acceptance and acknowledgement and appreciation. But there's a difference in having that message in religion and then weaponizing that in religion to condemn people. So that's kind of the toss-up that we deal with.
So in this conference, particularly since it's in Texas, will there be discussions, organizing, or you know, education, such, about things like bathroom bills? Because that's going to come up again. that's gonna come up again in the legislature in Texas, I fear.
So, at the end of the day, people are going to pee where they want to pee. Just let people pee. I want to get a T-shirt so bad that says, just let people pee. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, I'm so...
Or give peas a chance.
Everything deserves a toilet. Mm-hmm. I'm not very clear on why this is such a thing. Trans folk have existed way before there was any question of bathroom bills, and trans people have been going to the bathroom last I checked, because I haven't seen anything out in the streets. We're not overflowing with, feces and urine in the roads, so clearly they're using the restroom, and there hasn't been any issue. So creating non-issues is a big problem for me, and I most definitely think that at some point in time we will have conversations about that. But my personal opinion is there's a time and space for those conversations, and the conference is so much of addressing information and bringing awareness to things, but the overarching goal is to definitely bring more love and light and acknowledgement and acceptance to a community of people that are lacking that.
So you don't want to get all political and talk about
it. We'll definitely. I mean, if someone wants to talk about it, we'll talk about it. But I'm just
I agree with you. Like,
go pee where you want to pee, girl.
Space the way you want it. You don't need to bring in their issues,
right? And then I think sometimes when we do, not just particularly that, but whenever there are issues that are stemming in culture, and we bring them into our space, we tend to sometimes project that negativity, and so it just catches like wildfire. Negativity is one of those things. I wish we could bottle it and.
Do you know the one thing nobody can explain to me from the other side with the bathrooms?
What's that?
Can you imagine bathrooms where men and women use the same bathroom? And my answer to that is yes, I grew up in a house with one of those. Nobody can explain to me what sort of house they grew up in. Maybe a number of our legislators had two gay dads, and so it was all men in the house, and so they don't know how to share with women. But it seems awfully sick. We're at a break point, so let's take our break. You're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 Knon FM. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with Patti Fink. Our guest is Jade Lenore LaDuff, and we'll be back with more talking about the Black Trans Conference, your new job with Resource Center. You have some interesting things that you're working on, Jade, and we'll be back in a minute.
This is Rollins Gilliland, and I'm listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3, and darn glad to be doing it.
And welcome back to Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with Patti Fink, and our guest is Jade Lenore LaDuff. Jade, racism. We just kind of brushed over that, and that's certainly a big issue. Do you find, first of all, racism within the transgender community?
I do think it exists, yes.
And the way you're saying it, it seems like, it's kind of insidious, and we try to brush it under the rug.
So, this is the thing. And there is a great conversation that's being had about this particular topic, as I mentioned to you earlier, through a resource center in collaboration with Abounding Prosperity, a racial healing town hall. And in that, there are so many different components to racism. And the first thing is really finding out the definition of what racism is. What is it really? And then when you find that out, then you have to get to the point where you unpack how it's used or how it shows up. And essentially, when you talk about trans and gender nonconforming folk, you're talking about a demographic of people that in the world we live in are marginalized. And especially when you talk about a demographic of people that's already marginalized, and then you add a layer of transness to it, I mean, you can't help but be a double whammy. And I'm not saying that it's a horrible thing, and it's a jarring reality that a lot of people face. And conquering that is something that is going to take time, effort, and real substantive conversations to eradicate the racism that we have in the world.
Do you find it specifically in the transgender community, or not as much, but white trans people just don't have to deal with it from the outside?
Repeat the question.
Yeah, I'm not sure. See, again, my mouth isn't working real well, is it? Do you find that there is racism within the trans community, that white trans people really don't want to have much to do with the black trans community? Or do you find that it's maybe not so much that as you're just dealing with general racism? They don't even get to the trans part.
I think it can possibly be a combination of both. I think, and again, we had a great conversation about this the other day, in the LGBTQI plus spectrum. There definitely is a odor of racism. And then there's also like underlying prejudice. So when you think about different spaces that are created for LGBT people, you would assume that it's created for all LGBT people. But when you think about who created the space, and what was the intention of creating the space, and then you think about what is done to perpetuate the space in question, it makes sense. Now, making sense doesn't mean that I agree. Let's say that. So it makes sense how that mindset works for people that do perpetuate racism and prejudice. But I'm going to give an example. So someone made a comment at one of the town halls and said that there's a club in Dallas that plays whatever type of music that they were playing, and whenever the dance floor would get darker, quotes, the music would change. And they only knew this because of their engagement with the club, and they're like, well, why would you even do that? Like, who does that?
Yeah, it's right. So bizarre to my thinking, but I can think of a lot of white people who would think, oh, well, that's of course.
Right. And so
we need to change this.
Exactly. And so at the end of the day, I think understanding that racism, it's alive and well, unfortunately, but it's up to people to address it and call it out when they see it. I think sometimes people don't feel comfortable to say, well, I think that that's a racist comment, or I think that that's something racist that you're doing. You shouldn't do it, and I'm offended as a person that's not of color.
Okay, so talk about the difference between racism or preference, and when preference becomes racism, and when preference is just a preference. Because, I mean, there's lots of racism in the gay male community, that I can tell you. I can't tell you how many times I've been asked, well, do you date black men? And my answer, really, not that I would ever give a sarcastic answer to anything, was, well, not all of them, but I don't date every white man either. You know, that's not the first thing that I see. Oh, black. No. White. Yes. You know, how do you do that? I date a person. I don't date a
race. Or a skin color. Right.
Yeah.
And essentially, you hit the nail on the head. So at the end of the day, a preference is just that. It's something that you prefer. So when someone asks me what's my preference, my preference is, I'm not going to go into what my preference is, but my preference is this thing on? My preference is something, maybe I prefer someone that at least has the same amount of intellect as I do, that can stimulate my mind. And maybe my preference is someone that doesn't have children, or whatever the case may be. Now, how sometimes people turn preferences, or they quote unquote an assumed preference into a prejudice is when you weaponize it. So when you say, I refuse to, and we're going to have to switch it back to something that could actually be considered like racist, but for, people asking, do you date black guys? Well, I don't date every single black guy, but at the end of the day, if there is someone that I'm interested in or whatever the case may be, I'm not going to, completely discount them. But at the same time,
I date people who I hit it off with.
Right. But at the same time, you're not going out there saying, I refuse to date any black person because, I can't date a black person because they're black. I mean, that's why. So I think it's understanding. And at the end of the day, one of the things we talked about off air earlier was that people's definitions of things are different. And it's just being open-minded enough to understand the concepts and the constructs that are created and how to navigate that.
Mm-hmm. I think it's very interesting, particularly for black trans women, because they're probably the most vulnerable sector of our society. There have been, as most in the LGBT community know, amazing high numbers of murders of black trans women, not just in this year, but in previous years and years before that. And so it's difficult, I think, to think about what things are mixed up in that. It's got to be some racism too.
Absolutely.
I really believe that that's part of it.
Absolutely. Racism, fear, this whole concept of dating trans people. It's I don't even know what to call it anymore.
Okay, so let's go to that. Why is dating a trans person a weird thing?
I ask myself the same question.
And there are certain things that you have to think about. When you come out as gay or lesbian, there are things that you have to think about with dating. We usually come out, not so much today. Now kids come out as they're starting to date, which is great, but not all do. But back when we were younger, Patti, you must remember back into the 1930s, when we started dating when we were in our 20s, sometimes 30s, and we were acting like teenagers. We had to go through that teenage phase. So there's that with trans people who have to learn how to date again. But I was talking to a friend of mine, about 12 years ago when she transitioned, and we were talking about, well, when do I have to tell the person that I'm transgender?
That's a real thing.
And it's a big thing. Mm-hmm. It's not a deal breaker, but it is a big thing. And so what is the answer today in 2018? It was different 12 years ago, I think.
So that is such a sticky situation for a number of different reasons. So I'm going to use myself as an example. So for me, I really have to be completely on the same mental wavelength as whoever it is that I'm talking to. 98% of the men that approach me don't assume that I'm transgender. Mm-hmm. And that alone, at the end of the day, being a person of trans experience does not define me in totality.
Sure.
I'm so much more than my transness, and I always will be. So first, I'm a black woman. Second, I'm a person of trans experience. So that whole construct of telling them, as soon as you meet them, it doesn't always work that way. Mm-hmm. One, you don't know if this is a crazy, and this is Texas, a crazy gun-wielding, individual.
Like Josh, our board operator.
Right. And you inform them of something that you're told that you should be doing, mm-hmm. and they go ballistic. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really based on the situation. It's based on the person. It's based on the circumstance of what's going on and how you navigate that conversation. Oftentimes, I see a lot of individuals these days do online dating because, hey, they're not in front of you. So there's definitely some safety and security in disclosing and telling someone about your transness when they're not directly in front of you. There's no imminent harm. You know, what are they gonna do? You know, send you a virus through your phone or something? I don't know. So that is a part of it.
It's true. It is too. I mean, it's interesting that you said that 98% of the men, because we even within, maybe even particularly within the LGBT community, we don't know. It's adjusting my mic. We don't know the difference between gender identity and expression and sexual orientation, and so many people say, "Oh, well, how do you date as a trans person, and who does that mean you date?"
Right.
And I just kind of laugh sometimes, especially when we're doing some sort of education for the general public or for straight people or even within our own community, because it's such a bizarre question to me because they are so very, very different. Gender identity versus sexual orientation. So I tell people, everybody has a sexual orientation, everybody has a gender identity. And so they're not the same thing.
Right.
So a trans person may be straight, trans person may be bisexual, trans person may be gay. So it is a really, I mean, you add that layer on it, and trans dating can be very complicated.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, as with dating anyone, it gets complicated, it can get sticky, but for a number of different reasons, as you mentioned, it's even more of a sticky situation when you're talking about a demographic of people that have been targeted just for being who they are. So for me personally, I've disclosed to everyone, and clearly, you know, I'm not a very forward person when it comes to that, and sometimes I even forget. Like, I'm just like, oh, it'll be the next day, and I'm like, oh, dang it, I don't think they know. And it's one of those things. But I found that in my disclosing that I haven't had anyone that was me knocking on wood. I forgot we're on the radio. I haven't had anyone that had a negative response. So, again, I'm very intentional about the people that I surround myself with. And so if I'm telling you because I respect your time, space, and this is something that I need you to know. You know, I can't bear children, whatever the case may be. So this is what it is. And usually they're, oh, okay, you know, I didn't know. And I can't say that after I've disclosed to people that didn't already know, 98% of them were like, yeah, I can't, yeah, I'm sorry. And I'm like, hey, well, you know, wonderful. That makes two of us. Fist pounding, you're done.
You know, part of disclosing is, if you're going to get that reaction, it's for your own benefit too, that you haven't invested too much time, gotten too attached, gotten too, you know, wasted your time on somebody who's not going to
this is true, and it happens all the time. I mean, in the LGBTQI plus community, in the you know, whatever community, it happens where you've invested time and effort and space into individuals, and then later on you find out that they're really not the person. The real them shows up, and you're like, oh, who is this person? So it's the same thing. It's just a multi-layered approach.
So that's good that you've never felt that you've been in a dangerous situation.
I mean, that doesn't take away the fact that I've been fearful. It's like the scarlet letter. I mean, it's so emotionally jarring to be who you are and fear that who you are could evoke hatred or violence from someone else. That is a feeling that I would not wish on my worst enemy, because essentially I'm sitting across from a person that has no idea of something that is resonating, you know, a thought that's resonating in me that is turning into fear and concern, and I'm just, everything in my mind is just whirling around, because I'm like, okay, is this person going to knock me over the head? Is this person going to, you know, whatever the case may be. So the fear is absolutely a real thing, regardless of how I deal with it. But it's always there. I mean, not now because I'm with someone, but yeah, it's.
the person that you're with now, we're not going to go too deep into this. What was the reaction when you disclosed? Or did that person already know?
He already knew, just in how we met. So he already knew or had an idea. And then because he knew or had an idea when he asked, we had that conversation. It wasn't like a thing. It was like, oh, well, I kind of assumed that. But hearing it from you, it solidifies. Mm-hmm. So, but he's different because he's absolutely amazing. And, it's such a complimentary relationship. And, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I want to go back to my friend 12 years ago. She wasn't real comfortable disclosing that she was transgender. And I thought that could be kind of dangerous.
I do think it can be dangerous, especially when you, and this is a touchy subject right now on Facebook. But there are some individuals of the community that are in sex work. And we have got to find another way to talk about sex work, because sex work just makes it sound, people have been having sex and being paid for their services for a long time, honey, and it's not going to change. So,
and if you go to some place like Nevada where sex work is legal,
right?
They have like unions, and they talk about their salaries and all these these different things, and it's just it's a job for them.
Right.
It's the other group I want to join.
They will welcome you with open arms, David. So with that community, I think it's really, really important that there's some measure that you can utilize if you plan on engaging in some type of physical encounter where your transness may be presented in whatever shape or form. Now, if for any reason, maybe that's not going to happen, then maybe you don't really have to disclose. And again, when we talk about disclosure, it's going to be based on circumstance, situation, and each individual person. I can't say this is what you need to do to disclose and this is the right way to disclose. I can't say that because everyone's life and situation is different. I can only...
And you're really just saying, well, if you and I were going to go to a movie...
No, I'm not going to tell you anything.
I don't have to go with you as a trans person as opposed to a woman.
Right. Yeah.
However, if the relationship were going to develop any deeper, you need to have a conversation.
Absolutely. And as with anyone, you would want someone to provide you with that information when feelings and emotions are becoming more and more vested.
Sure.
And that's with anything in life. That's with anything in life. So absolutely, especially something when you're talking about, and I'm going to give this example, when you're talking about a cisgender man that may be dating a woman of trans experience, or even vice versa. Well, yeah, a cisgender man that's dating a woman of trans experience, and in his mind, sorry, Mike. In his mind, he's thinking about, his family, and he's thinking about kids and all these different things. And if you can't bear children, that's something that you need to let him know.
We need to take a break. You're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 KNON FM. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with Patti Fink, and our guest is Jade Lenore LaDuff from Black Trans Women and Resource Center. We'll be back with more right after this.
Hi, this is Valletta Lil, and I listen to Lambda Weekly. I hope that you will too.
And this is Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet here with Patti Fink, and we're talking to Jade Lenore LaDuff. Jade is with Black Trans Women, and they're going to have a conference the end of April. What are the dates?
It's April 24th through April 29th, and it's at the Wyndham Park in Dallas, Texas. And the event consists of workshops, and also events that transpire majority of the time at night. And the conference itself is free. However, you can go on the website to register for the conference. It's btac.blacktrans.org, or you can send an email to BTAC at blacktransmen.org for more information about that. And just some of the events that are going to transpire this year, we have our we have our meet and greet that's going to be on Monday at 7 o'clock. It's going to be held at Cheddar's this year. On Tuesday, we have our opening ceremony at 7 p.m. We have on Wednesday, Trans Manifest Live, which is like a talent show / open mic night. Whatever your talent is, you can do that there. And there have been a few years where I've done something, pretty interesting. So, come check that out. And so Trans Manifest is on Wednesday from 8 to 12. The pageant, so Black Trans Advocacy Conference incorporates a pageant, which is the Black Trans International Pageantry System. And that pageant is going to be held on Thursday from 7 to 12 that week. And the current reigning Black Trans International is Tiffany Starr. And we've had a previous reigning Black Trans International, which was Talia Cassadine. And so
Trenton Johnson is Black Trans Man.
So Black Trans Man 2018 is Trenton Johnson.
And a lot of people here in Dallas know him because he's from here and he's been real active this last year.
Absolutely. So definitely kudos to our current reigning Black Trans International folks. Thursday, I talked about that. Friday is going to be the gala. So we hold this beautiful gala every year, and the gala is going to be held on that Friday from 8 to 12. And this is essentially the red carpet event of the week, and people look forward to this event every year because it's a chance for you to get dolled up and put on evening gowns and just
tuxedos.
I'm sorry, y'all. I'm such a girl. I'm so sorry. Like everything is sparkles and rainbows and glitter and pink. So yes, for everyone to get dolled up in their best attire and really have a great time and build community. And I haven't been to an award ceremony that celebrated trans folk. Mm-hmm. I mean, I haven't until I came to the Black Trans Advocacy Conference.
And Patti, you really, if you have time, especially on that Friday, because there are always workshops and stuff going on Friday, you really should go. It is a fun conference. I get invited to I don't know how many things and meetings and conferences and all kinds during the year. I always take time to spend a few hours at this conference. I just enjoy it because, like I said, I blend. Right. But and I'm joking when I say that. But you know what? I can't think of another place where I feel more comfortable. I mean, it is just that kind of a conference. If you're a white trans person and you're thinking, oh, well, there aren't any white trans conferences here in this area, go to this one.
Right. I would absolutely recommend individuals to attend the conference. Even though it's geared towards persons of color, everyone is welcome at the conference. And I think the overarching goal is to create community, build awareness, and to spread as much love as possible into the world that we live in. We want to be the change we want to see.
Okay, and then Saturday?
Saturday is Family Day, and it's from 10 to 12. And then also Saturday night is going to be the Black Trans Advocacy Ball, and the ball is going to be from 8 to 12.
Okay, so that's the conference. If you just can't remember all the initials and everything, just look up Black Trans Dallas. Black Trans Network, Black Trans Dallas. You'll find it, and it'll get you to the website that has all the information on it. And I'm sure the conference schedule will be there.
Absolutely,
if it's not there yet, it will be.
There.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you're traveling from out of town, can you get a room there?
Yes. So rooms are available at the host hotel. And when you go to the website, there will be more information there about the rooms and
discounts and everything else.
And they're actually beautiful. They're suites.
Mm-hmm. Cool. We've had several people on recently from the trans community who lately have been having good stories about coming out to their families, which is so good to hear. Because before that, it was terrible. family reactions. 2 weeks ago, we had on somebody who's running for the legislature, and Valerie has a trans kid, and she's running because she wasn't happy with the bathroom bills. She is a real mama bear. Now, your story seems to be similar to that.
Yeah, similar, yes. So...
Well, no, your mother didn't run for the legislature because you...
Right. She definitely would if someone gave her a platform. But no. My mother is lovely. Hi, Mom, if you're watching. No, my mother's amazing. And so for me, it took... this wasn't my first time transitioning. I previously tried to transition on my own in Louisiana, which, as we all know, is not a very progressive state.
My wife is from Louisiana.
Oh, we love her, though.
So is Josh.
But people... Right, it's still not a progressive state, and
They left.
Right, so at the
we're all here.
Right, we left.
Notice?
We're not here. We're not there. So at the end of the day, I was unsuccessful. I feared for my life and all different types of things, and moving forward. So I was able to finally love myself enough to live my most authentic self, and in that. Coming out to my family was just jarring, and I believe it or not, I sent a text message. Because I felt as though I love to write, so I wrote this beautiful text, and I basically said, I have to do this. This is the one selfish thing that I'm doing in my life, and I'm doing it for me, and I'm okay with that. If that means I'm going to be disowned, if that means that, you won't have me as your child, I'm willing to make the sacrifice to live my most authentic self, because at the rate we're going, this is horrible. And my mom replied back, "As long as you're happy." And
do you know that's exactly what my mother told me?
Is it?
It really is.
And my sister, are you happy? That's all I really care about.
Which is the right answer, I think. My mother was working at Sarah Lawrence College, big lesbian school, and I was in high school at the time, and we were just talking, and she was talking about some of the women who she knew, and some of the women who she had learned to love, really, who went to the school. And she was just explaining it to me a little bit, and she just said, you know what, you have to do what makes you happy.
And I think that's the most important thing. And so I think I read a post the other day on Facebook, and it says, you haven't failed your children because they're gay or lesbian or bi or whatever the case may be. And it said you failed your children when you disown them. And so for my mom, when we finally had a conversation, she was like, well, I mean, I'm glad you finally realized it, because I'm the same person. And I think from the years that you guys have known me, I'm the same person. There's nothing different. Well, I say nothing different, but there's nothing that's different about the character of the person that I am outside of my aesthetic. And even my aesthetic is not very different than what it was before either. Now my father, on the other hand, was a little bit more, tough to crack. And in the years that have passed, it was so jarring to have conversations with him, because he would refer to me by the incorrect names, incorrect pronouns, and I would essentially not talk to him.
How much did that bother you?
Oh my gosh, I wouldn't talk to him. I wouldn't call him. I wouldn't text him, because it was too much for me to have to. It's like going in reverse. If you get in your car and just put it in reverse and drive.
And the reason I ask you that, another transgender friend of mine had a mother in her 80s who still called her by her boy name, and it didn't bother her. And she said, this is why. She said, you know what, she's 80 years old, I'm almost 50, and she loves me as much now as she always did, and that's more important to me than she uses a name that I changed.
I think that's different. I think, when it comes to older folk, sometimes they get a pass, like especially if they're like 80, 90, 100 years old, and it's more difficult for them to change a behavior that's learned over a long time. Now, at the same token, I feel as though that there has to be some level of respect given. For me, it's not, you know how people say preferred pronouns? I don't have preferred pronouns. I have required pronouns. And for me, I can't put myself in those types of situations, especially if you claim to love me or you understand what it is that I've gone through.
And you know, there are some people who, as I've watched transition, and it just comes out of my mouth the wrong pronoun, and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry.
That's different. That's different too.
But, it is. But you know what it is with me? I'm seeing the same person. You were a boy, you're a girl. You're a man, you're a woman. I don't care. You're you. The reason we have this relationship is because I just like you.
Right.
And there's nothing mean or malicious about it at all. But I know I do it sometimes, and
that's, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to, as a person of trans experience, you have to understand the vessel in which, and the intent behind what's being said. Mm-hmm. So if someone is saying something with the intent to inflict harm, then clearly you're going to address it in that way. But if someone clearly makes a mistake and apologizes for the mistake, and whatever the case may be, then I feel as a person of trans experience that I at least owe that person some type of space to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to accept your apology because I know it wasn't your intention. I'm not going to completely attack them and go off the deep end unless it's warranted. Mm-hmm. I know I look like I might not go off the deep end, and very seldom has that happen, but she exists. Worry not.
I'll be careful.
Yeah, well, I mean, but you've only known me as Jade,
right?
So
and then it's easier.
Yeah,
it really is. Yeah, like when Jade came in, we were talking about names, and I was like, "Oh, right, that's not your birth name, is it?"
Right. I mean, I forget I'm trans all the time. Mm-hmm. Hey, it happens.
Mm-hmm.
When you live an authentic life, and Jelinski says this all the time, you know, we live authentic lives in a made-up world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
that's so true.
And oh my gosh, it resonates with me so much, and I find myself saying it all the time. And it couldn't be more true to someone that has walked a journey similar to mine.
Mm-hmm. And you know how I've always looked at it? I remember the first time I was on the radio, and I've told the story before, but I was like maybe 20 years old in Albany, New York, on a midnight talk show, because that's the only time that you can talk about these racy subjects like being gay. And so I was on the air, and it was a call-in show, and I remember one of the questions. The question was, does your family accept you? And I thought, my answer was, well, they're my family. It just never occurred to me. What do you mean, do they accept me? And I said, and they rephrased the question, and I said, well, they're the ones who are nuts. Why, you know, why wouldn't they accept me? Like, I'm the normal one. You know, the other thing that you were saying, Jade, was that you're willing to give up everything to live your authentic self, and to have that hurt. That's not the part. That's not exactly how you said. But here was my point. Everybody else is living their authentic selves, so you're not doing something that you weren't taught to do, I would think.
Right.
If they're straight, they're marry person opposite sex. If you're gay, you marry somebody same sex. If you're transgender, you live as the gender that you feel.
Right.
That's your being. I think that just hit me when you said that. It was like, no, you're not giving anything up.
But I think,
well, I think that what I was planning on having to possibly give up wasn't me. It was more of the relationship.
The relationship, yeah.
More
but
of
they
the
need
sacrifice
to understand
on their part, not
they're
on mine.
living their authentic selves.
Indeed, and I think what the overarching message is that persons of trans experience live their authentic lives,
mm-hmm.
and when we start to label and put people in boxes, we take away the human experience. And we take away the fact that this is a person, and this person wants to thrive and exist in their truth.
And I think that's been very true for many years, because people say, oh, there haven't been very many trans activists, like politically active and organizing and such. So no, because they're busy finally living their authentic lives.
Right.
And so, you know, for us to say, well, where are they? We probably know lots of trans people, but they weren't.
Right, they weren't out.
Jade, we are out of time. I want to thank you for coming.
Oh, Jingle Bells.
Our guest next week is Jelinski Brown.
Oh, wow. Who
Jade works with. Jelinski's been with us before. We'll have a discussion about who knows what when Jelinski's here. But thank you for being here with us. I'll see you at the conference.
Absolutely.
If I don't see you before. And
great to see you, Jade. Come back again.
Likewise. Thank you.
For all of us here at Lambda Weekly, have a great week. We'll see you next week.
This is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like, follow, or subscribe to us and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call.